All right.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weekly Space Hangout. I am Nicole Gugliucci, and I am currently in a very noisy coffee shop in Charlottesville, Virginia. Uh, I'm here for my graduation this weekend. Since I'm on travel, I will be doing the production from the background, but I have with me two lovely co-hosts. I have David Dickinson.
Hey.
So, hello. And Matthew Francis. And so they have a host of stories that we are going to be talking about. Continue to send your comments in all the usual places on YouTube, on Google+, use the hashtag Space Hangout, and I will get those questions in and keep sharing the links out, but you won't be hearing much from me this week. But we have some stories about major moon impacts, about the Kepler space mission, of course, is currently having a little bit of trouble, and solar activity, and I may give a quick spoiler-free review of Star Trek, the movie, the second reboot movie.
We're the only science writers that currently aren't watching Star Trek right now, I think.
Exactly. It's because I already saw it. I'm going again tonight. But David, why don't you... I'm going again. I'm in costume. David, why don't you take it away?
Okay.
And Matthew, go ahead. Maybe start with the moon crater one. I'm interested to hear about this one.
I can start on that. Yeah, that came around last night, and it was very interesting. It came around on Twitter. NASA released one of their science videos. They were talking about that they had seen. They have a survey that goes on out of the Marshall Space Flight Center, out of the Meteoroid Impact Environment Office, that they're watching and continuously videoing the moon whenever they can for impacts. And it turned out on March 17th, they saw a fairly large-sized boulder-type impact on the moon that was about 4th magnitude, which means that if you were looking at the moon at that time, you would have seen it. The moon at that time, the first thing I saw that, I started scrambling to see what the phase and the viewing visibility of the moon. The moon was about the same phase it is right now. The moon reaches first quarter tomorrow. At that time on March 17th, it was a few days prior to first quarter. It was a waxing crescent. And this impact was in the mare of Imbrium on the moon. So it was on the nighttime side, but the earthward-facing side. You know, people always mistake the far side and the night side of the moon. Sometimes the night side of the moon is actually facing toward Earth during a new moon, during an eclipse and things like that. So, and it was kind of funny last night when I saw the video, when I saw the tweet come around, I misunderstood a friend of mine. I thought he said May 17th instead of March. So I thought he's over in UK. I thought he means there's an impact going on right now. So I scrambled and got my binoculars and ran out and took a quick look at the moon just to see if there was something going on amiss, like we had a really large impact going on. Then I came back and read his email again. It's like, oh, okay, it said March. So then we started combing through Flickr pages last night, looking at people's photos. And incidentally, I emailed Bill Cook at Marshall Space Flight Center and asked him about the exact time because it wasn't really clear when this occurred. He said it was at 3:55 UTC on March 17th. So that would have been early in the morning, late at night. It would have been about not quite 11 o'clock at night for the East Coast. And I looked at the visibility. The visibility would have been over the Pacific Rim region in the west coast of the United States. So if anyone was imaging the moon that night, and a lot of people were because it was very near Jupiter at the time, so a lot of people were imaging the moon. Take a look at your photos. You might have caught this impact. It's quite possible.
Is that what is Matthew showing? I think I
Yeah, that's
the sequence.
Yeah, that's the sequence of photos from NASA.
Yeah.
Released. I'm sorry for the low resolution. That's all I could find, but. You can see that the explosion washes everything out while it's going. So it was a pretty major impact.
When you watch the video too, it was only seconds long. It was pretty quick, but it was interesting that we don't get a lot of impacts. They watch the moon incidentally when there's a large shower like the Leonids or the Perseids or the Geminids. They have seen impacts of those micrometeorites on the dark side of the moon. If the moon is at a favorable phase, naturally during full moon you're not going to see a 4th magnitude impact. It wouldn't appear. But when the moon is at a crescent phase like that, especially when it's a waxing crescent because it's in the evening time, so a lot of people would have been watching it. I'd really be interested to see if there have been amateurs that have caught flashes on the moon before, either visually or photographically. So it'd be interesting to see.
So can you maybe repeat that date and time again for any astrophotographers watching?
It was on March 17th, 2013 at 3:55 UTC. That's right down to the second. So, and I incidentally took a look at first on March 17th. There was a virtual star party that night. However, so I got to thinking, I was like, I wonder if we had happened to be imaging the moon at the same time. So I watched back through the entire virtual star party from March 17th just to see, until I found out, okay, UTC, it was actually the morning of Sunday the 17th. It wasn't the evening. But when we first saw the message go out, it wasn't clear if that was March 17th the evening or March 17th the morning. So I checked. I was like, that would have been very cool if we had caught the flash in the virtual star party, but it didn't occur. I'm always thinking of weird stuff like that.
That would be a VSP first. That would be a VSP first. Maybe speaking of activity, you have some stuff on some solar activity that's going on.
Yeah, the sun is finally starting to show. It's starting to look like it's actually going toward its maximum, like it's supposed to look like, because we're entering into the peak of solar cycle 24, which is peaking the end of this year into the beginning of 2014. But the sun hasn't really been acting like it's going to peak. It's been kind of a sputtering solar cycle where, had I not known, there's been a few times, like the last few weeks, where there almost were no sunspots. Now, the sun started getting active again this week, sent out several large coronal mass ejections. None of them were earthward aimed. There's some talk that we might get a glancing blow from one on this coming Saturday night. And we haven't quite reached storm level on the estimated KP index, which shows like how powerful the auroras are supposed to be. But we made a run at it at about 4, which is pretty respectable. So, and that sunspot group, incidentally, is earthward facing now. When it started throwing out flares earlier this week, it was rotated off to the side. Had a very nice coronal or solar flare prominence in hydrogen alpha. I'm looking at the sun every day in hydrogen alpha and in white light. I have 2 scopes. So there was one I had to video because it was a pretty amazing. When it's off on the side in profile, there was a large, about almost, I'd say, a fifth of the diameter of the sun. I actually called my wife out. It's like, you got to see this. We haven't had a flare like this for a couple of years. So it was pretty impressive. But hopefully we get some more solar activity, just no Carrington events.
No, I was looking out the window to see if the sun is out behind clouds here, but I don't think it is, unfortunately.
I got blue skies today, but of course it's going to rain for graduation, so.
I was just looking an hour ago, and it's still pretty. It wasn't as active in hydrogen alpha, but it was pretty active in white light. There's about a dozen sunspot groups earthward facing now, all moderate size. There's one really large one that everybody's watching right now, but the sun is being pretty active. We don't quite understand why the sun was so inactive through 2008, 2009. It was one of the most inactive periods we'd ever seen. And this solar cycle seems to be having a hard time getting started. There's a lot of theories out there in solar helioseismology as far as what is going on. There's even some theories out there that solar cycle 25 the one after this, may almost be non-existent. Like we're entering into a larger minimum out there in addition to the maximum. So we'll see. It's an interesting time to watch the sun.
Very cool. The grinder's on, so maybe you guys can pick up. I need to mute myself. Well, actually, you had an annular eclipse video. I can share that link, but maybe we can move out in the solar system to Uranus and Neptune with Matthew.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, this is a paper that just came out this week. It was based on, actually, it's really funny how we're still able to get new data, get new results from Voyager 2 data after so many years. But there were some scientists who looked at Voyager 2 data and Hubble Space Telescope data, and what they were trying to do is understand the structure of the atmospheres of Uranus and Neptune, which are, if you look at pictures of them, you'll notice that they don't have the big obvious storms that you see on Jupiter and Saturn. Cassini has been taking great pictures showing how stormy Saturn is, and of course Jupiter, the storms are a lot more obvious. But Uranus and Neptune, the storms are a lot less obvious, partly because they don't have nearly as much cloud cover, but they have incredibly high winds. And so this research effort was trying to understand where are these winds? Do they pierce deep into the atmosphere, or are they confined to the upper levels? And so what they found is they modeled the atmospheres based on the behavior of the gravity, based on if you have a storm that goes deep into the atmosphere, if you have winds that go deep into the atmosphere, it can actually change the rotation of the planet.
Wow.
That's a big difference between, you know, a gaseous world like Uranus and Neptune versus a solid world like Earth. Although we do have an analogous situation on Earth. If you have a strong enough earthquake, it can affect the rotation of the Earth slightly. And so this is what they were doing, is they were looking for the effect of these jet streams, which can travel, you know, like 600, 700, 800 miles per hour across the planets. And they did not find a substantial change in the planet's rotation based on these winds, which means these winds are confined to a relatively thin layer of the atmosphere. And I don't know about you, but that kind of surprised me. You know, you kind of think about, oh well, you know, the structure of the planets, as far as we know, is you have the atmosphere, and it gradually transitions into a dense, thick, you know, ocean of water and methane and ammonia. It doesn't have you don't have a clearly defined surface of the ocean like you do on Earth, and so as a result, you know, I was surprised. But of course, I'm not a planetary scientist. I'm a cosmologist. But it's kind of interesting to think that these winds are actually, you know, a layer. You know, they're icing over a calm cake of still atmosphere. Sorry, I'm hungry.
A lot of food analogies.
Yes, but you know, but again, you know, if I can, you know, something that's kind of frustrating too, though, of course, is that we have only visited each of these planets once with Voyager 2. There are no projected missions to either of these worlds, so these are planets in our own solar system, and we don't understand them that well. So we would, you know, it would be awesome if we could actually, you know, go and have an extended mission visiting like Cassini or like Galileo. So, for what it's worth.
I think scientists are afraid to send a probe to Uranus because people will make fun of them. So.
Well, actually, we could talk about that too. You notice I pronounce it Uranus, which of course isn't very close to. It isn't very close to the Greek pronunciation either, but it's closer than Uranus, which is the way people tend to insist on pronouncing it. Yeah. So. I
think it would take about a decade to get out there to Neptune. Just look at New Horizons. I believe it's past the orbit of Neptune now. I think. Or not.
I don't think it has yet.
Yeah. Well, no, because Neptune, because it crosses Pluto's orbit. Neptune and Pluto actually.
Pluto's farther than Neptune again.
Yeah, right now. Yeah. So.
But
I don't think. But New Horizons has been going since 2006, I believe, when it launched, January 2006.
Yes.
Still got
2 more years.
It was before Pluto got demoted.
Yeah. It was still a planet in those days.
It was still a planet.
And we've got 2 years, and it's going to reach Pluto. You know,
and it's going really fast too.
Yeah, that was one of the fastest launches ever from. It's not the fastest moving spacecraft relative to the sun, but I know it went from Earth. It passed the Earth's moon in 20 hours after launch, so that's very fast.
Wow.
Yeah.
And of course, that is a problem too. Is, you know, if you're going that fast and you want to settle into an orbit around Uranus or Neptune, you have to find a way to slow down. And that's an engineering challenge. You know, so you either have to go slow and take a very long time to reach the planet, or you have to be moving really fast, get there faster, and then figure out how to brake, or do a flyby, in which case you've got, you know, you don't have that long to study it.
Yeah. That's what New Horizons is doing with Pluto and
right.
We're going to have about 1 week of very interesting activity with New Horizons, and then hopefully it's got something else to. I don't believe they found a potential post target for it. I know Ice Hunters is trying to find one.
Ice Hunters was trying to find one, but our amazing citizen scientists went through all the data we had, and so we don't have any new data to actually go through at the moment. I know that the ground-based telescope that was working on it, they have either haven't had time or haven't had telescope time, allocated time to do it. But we don't have any data at the moment. But that's the hope, is to find a second target.
So, speaking of Neptune and Pluto, I've heard there was some thought that Neptune's largest moon, Triton, may resemble Pluto when we see it. That they may be very similar.
I've heard stuff about that too, although I believe Pluto has a slightly thicker atmosphere.
Yeah.
Although it's seasonal. And again, this is my memory, so
yeah.
we need a Pluto scientist here.
The blurry Hubble photos look kind of orangey black too. Like it may have a little coloration to it, which would be kind of cool. I hope it doesn't just
all
look
10 pixels that are in there. All 10 pixels.
I hope it doesn't just look like our moon or something like that.
Well, if it did, that'd be an interesting thing too, because nobody expects that.
Yeah, that's true.
We don't. Nobody.
Insert obvious Monty Python joke.
Yeah, as well.
Yeah. And there's a pretty good chance New Horizons may find more moons. I would make a small bet it probably will find more moons when it goes by.
Yeah,
And then we
I've
can name
heard
them
the
after
similar
more
things.
planets.
There we go.
So another big news item this week was Kepler spacecraft is in trouble. I think none of us have too much more information than what you can find. Skimming some of the articles about it. I know Amy Shiratitle had an article saying, yes, they've lost one of their 4 reaction wheels. Another one had been down previously. With just 2, they can't do the exoplanet science that they're hoping to do. However, it is already past its original mission time. It's been 4 years. So we've gotten our money's worth and then some. However, there's other science that Kepler could be doing as well, and I think you guys want to expand on that.
We got TESS will be coming up in 2017. That's going to take the next level of planetary hunting. And there's
that stands for...
That is the Transiting Exoplanet Survey Satellite, I believe it is. But it's actually going to be it's going to be looking for planets as well, but it's going to be in low Earth orbit, and it's going to look, whereas Kepler is looking off just in one direction in the area of Cygnus, Hercules, and Lyra, TESS will be able to do a much broader survey than what Kepler's doing right now.
But the exoplanet hunt continues with many other techniques and telescopes, and there's one with a fantastic acronym that Matthew has covered for us.
Well, actually, it's a terrible acronym. It's
oh, really?
It's one of those. It's the acronym is beer, like the beverage, but they were really stretching hard on it, because beer stands for beaming. Let's see. Oh crud! Now I've got it. It's gone. It's beaming ellipsoidal, and then sorry, hang on a sec. Let me pull up my story.
I read it, but I don't remember what it stands for.
Yeah, it stands for beaming ellipsoidal and reflection emission modulation. Okay.
Oh yeah, of course.
So it has no, they had to very selectively pick which words are a part of the acronym. This is what the science writer Mary Roach would call "please," a pretty lame excuse for an acronym, scientists and experimenters. But and I am reading off my screen, so that was not memorized. But beer is an interesting technique, even if they really stretched hard on the acronym, because what it is that it's looking for very small fluctuations in light based on if the companion to the star orbits close enough, it will make the star's motion wobble. Well, that has a Doppler effect, but it also has an effect from relativity called beaming, which is that the star's light will be brightened if the star is moving relatively towards us, and it will be fainter if it's moving relatively away from us. Well, this isn't confined to moving directly towards us or directly away from us. If you're looking at the system from an angle, you'll still see some of this beaming effect. So it's not a very large effect unless things are moving close to the speed of light, but it is still noticeable if the stars are moving, if the companion object is close enough. And so, but then that alone isn't enough to tell you that there's a companion, or it isn't enough to tell you much about the companion. So that's when the other 2 letters of the acronym come in. If the exoplanet is close enough, and this, of course, it's like most other methods. It's very strongly biased towards really massive exoplanets that are orbiting close in. So this is basically a method for hot Jupiters, as we call them, which always brings to mind some kind of really cheesy photo. It's like calendar hot Jupiters, but it's if it's close enough, it will actually slightly, very slightly, perturb the shape of the star. Instead of being spherical, it'll be very slightly ellipsoidal. And that means also a slight variation in light. Then there's the final letter of the acronym, which is the reflection emission part. When the star will actually heat up a spot on the exoplanet, so it's a little hotter than the rest of the planet. Well, that will heat up enough that it'll emit infrared light, which will then feed back into the star's spectrum. And so you've got three effects, all of which are very small, but all of which are very distinctive.
Yeah.
And so what they found with this particular exoplanet using the Beer method is they could measure the mass of the exoplanet, which is very hard to do, by the way.
Yeah.
And they also found found evidence that the atmosphere of the planet is rotating faster than the planet itself, something called superrotation.
Yeah.
And they can't measure the exact speed, but the fact that the hot spot on the planet is moving as the planet orbits. And it's that close, that means the same side of the exoplanet faces its star, just like the same side of the moon always faces Earth.
Yeah.
Tidally locked, yeah. But the hot spot is moving. The hot spot is getting smeared out as the jet stream of the planet goes around. So it's a really interesting thing, and the fact that you can get this with observations, even though you can't see the planet. Mind you, you cannot see this planet. It's too close. It's to its star, and the system is too far away. But you can tell that it's rotating, and you can measure its mass. So I thought that was a really interesting technique, and we should be seeing more good stuff using the Beer algorithm.
And yes.
Oh, go ahead. Oh, it amazes me that they can even tease this kind of stuff out when you think about, those stars have to have sunspots like our sun.
Right.
So when you're doing exoplanet transit surveys and things like that, that has to all be untangled from the other signal that's coming out of there. And stars are variable too and things like that. So it amazes me they can tease all those things out in addition to everything else that's going on.
Right.
Now, I'm impressed that they're using when I think relativistic beaming, I think, AGN, active galaxy jets, electrons moving nearly at the speed of light, like that. Then beaming is a huge effect. But the fact that they're talking about these really tiny measurement methods, it's just showing how our exoplanet detection methods have improved immensely.
Exactly.
It's too bad they shelved. It's too bad they shelved Terrestrial Planet Finder that was supposed to go up there. Those proposed missions.
Yeah.
But I think if we're going to find any kind of life out there, if we could get any kind of spectral measurements of different objects, that's probably where we're going to actually see things like interesting chemistry going on in our lifetime, anyway.
Yeah.
So, all right, well, and go astronomers for naming something after beer.
Yes.
If you've ever been to an astronomy conference, you know what that's like. David, you had news on Chris Hadfield coming back from space on the Soyuz, and then you've got some upcoming launches.
Yeah, Chris Hadfield, the astronaut from the Canadian Space Agency and the former commander of the ISS, came back down to Earth earlier this week. I don't know if he made 1 million followers on Twitter. We were trying to get him up to that point. When he was
oh my God, he should have at least 1 million. Are you kidding me? He's been tweeting from space.
Oh, he deserves it.
Right?
I don't know if any astronaut has hit 1 million followers yet, but he may be the first one. But he did a lot for NASA, for social outreach, for public outreach, for what was going on up there on the ISS. It was a very good documentary that the Nature of Things Canadian TV show did online that you can watch about the man who tweeted from space. That was very much worth watching. He did He beat me to the International Space Station and covered Space Oddity. I was like, I told my wife, I was like, I even showed her the video. I was like, you got to see this. This is like, I thought of that years ago, but you know, that was kind of cool.
Oh, it was lovely. That's right. That only came out on Monday. I keep thinking that was last week. That was Monday. So
it came out right before they leaked it out Sunday with no fanfare, no mention of it right before.
It was beautiful. Go if you haven't seen it, go watch it.
It's very cool.
Yeah.
I don't know if David Bowie got a bump on iTunes because of that, but but
well, I think they should release his version on iTunes.
Yeah, I wonder how many kids are like, I've never heard that song before. but there was also an interesting launch out of China that was kind of unannounced that a bunch of us were following. We saw the NOTAM come out where they have the notice to airmen that China was possibly going to do a launch out of one of their spaceports. And you know, to this date, it's not really known if it was a military launch or if it was a atmospheric test, like the government was saying. But Hong Kong actually saw this launch. There was reports of a UFO as seen from Hong Kong Monday, and what it was actually the second stage booster lighting and doing its fuel dump. You could actually, it looks like kind of a V-shaped cone coming out of the sky of light. I thought that was interesting. There was that UFO sighting that was definitely a launch out of China. China's been pretty active this year. Their space program, they're going back up to their Tiangong space station next month. They're doing another manned launch. So we're going to have 2 crewed space stations in orbit for a brief period of time. They'll be up there for about a week, but this will be the second time they've sent a crew up to their station. It's a much smaller, it's about the size of a school bus space station. It's not a big space station, but still kind of cool that somebody else has got that capability out there. And there were a few other
Skylab, though, right? I mean, Skylab wasn't.
Yes,
was maybe a little bigger.
Skylab was an old Saturn booster that was hollowed out, I believe.
Right.
So it was just one of the surplus boosters they had. They just celebrated 40 years of the launch of Skylab this week.
Yeah, that's what made me think of it.
That was one of the very, very first launches I watched as a kid. Not the launch of Skylab, which was unmanned, but one of the first crews that went up there with Alan Bean, and I think it was 2 or 3 astronauts that went up there. It was one of the very first launches I remember watching when I was like 4 years old. So, yeah, that's all coming up. And I remember when Skylab came down, the whole ruckus about that. That was kind of interesting. It's strange to think probably by 2030 or so we'll see the ISS come down, which will be very bizarre. I hope it stays up there longer than that, but it's. I know they want to keep it going till 2020 at least. So.
Yeah, that is amazing to think about all that infrastructure coming down in a blaze of fire.
And then there's that movie coming out this fall where they blow it up.
I saw the preview with Sandra Bullock. Yeah, I saw this preview.
Yeah, that trailer was frightening. I don't know about the rest of you, but I was like sweating through that trailer.
From what I saw in Universe Today, they said they didn't consult with NASA on that video, so I don't know how accurate. It's a shame they didn't, but I don't know if it's going to be like Apollo 18 all over again, or if it might be a good movie. I'll probably go see it.
Speaking of movies, here's a segue. Here's a transition for you. So Star Trek, of course, officially is officially out now in the U.S. I promise no spoilers. I kept myself spoiler-free before I saw it on Wednesday night. Since I knew I'd be traveling, I made sure to see it on Wednesday night with my boyfriend, and I'm going to see it again tonight. So to give you some perspective, it is good enough that I'm happy to spend money to see it again this weekend. There's been a lot of back and forth from the reviews that I have seen about whether or not it's a true Trek movie and this and that, and whether or not it's serious and philosophical enough, or if it's too much action. It's a gorgeous movie. It's action-packed. You can definitely expect that. And as a Trek fan, not a long-time Trek fan, more of a recent Trek fan, but I have seen all the Star Trek, so I've got some cred. I really enjoyed it. So if you like Star Trek, go see it. It's worth it.
There was no red matter in this one.
There's no red matter. Well, the red matter wasn't that bad. Come on.
Compared to other things in Star Trek, red matter wasn't so.
No, it wasn't. Bad. It wasn't that bad.
There are a lot of lens flares, though. They.
Yes.
It wasn't as bad as like when they do a baryon scan or stuff like that.
No.
So,
but the lens flares did make me cringe a lot. They did not learn from all the fans making fun of them.
I almost wonder in CGI movies, like at what point they'll start taking lens flares out. It's almost like we expect that right now because people are used to seeing movies the way they were.
it's not necessary to the extent that they have been adding them in. It's silly. It's silly.
Between doing Star Trek and Star Wars, I'm really surprised that J.J. Abrams doesn't just have a nervous breakdown.
That's true. That's true. That's a lot of fandom you have to deal with. We're picky. We are demanding. We want to see quality stuff, but
I wouldn't be surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they call in like Trek historians just to keep the timeline and everything right.
Yeah. Benedict Cumberbatch was fantastic. Leonard Nimoy makes an appearance, which is great. So you're gonna have all your fun, action-packed, and I will not say anything about the plot because that would be mean. But if you're into it, go see it. I am going in my original series science officer costume tonight.
Cool.
It'll be a good time. Did I miss anything? Do we have any other new pressing news from the week?
There was that time lapse of the annular eclipse. I don't know if it's possible, if it will crash the internet to share it.
I shared the link. I'm not going to try and share it on public Wi-Fi.
It's I had done so much about the eclipse, I didn't get to go see it, of course.
I'll try to pull it up while we're talking.
Yeah. It was the annular eclipse that passed over Australia last week.
I watched it on the internet. So.
Yeah, I did too. And it's interesting that there were so many people in so many remote locations that were watching it across Pacific and Australia that photos and videos really trickled in. Like even till today, I'm still seeing new stuff. But there was one observer, actually two, Jeff Sims and Colin Legg, and Peter Nancy actually was another. I think I got his name right. He did the soundtrack for it. Okay. But there was a video that they had done from Western Australia of the annular eclipse rising that was pretty remarkable when you watch the animation because they actually caught the green flash on the limb of the eclipse as it was coming up. I had never seen that during an eclipse before. And it was pretty remarkable what they had done. They were out past Newman, Australia, at a place that had one of the coolest names ever. It was called the Plutonic Gold Mine was the name of the area that they were in. They were out in the Great Sandy Desert out in Western Australia. But they got the animation on Vimeo. If you haven't seen it, it's I'm surprised it didn't go more viral than it did. I think it was because it came out so long after the eclipse that everybody was like, "Oh, it's old news." But it was a pretty amazing animation to watch. And you can see on the still frame that they have up on the screen, they actually caught Bailey's beads very early on where the moon was. You don't tend to see Bailey's beads as much during an annular eclipse because the moon is too small to cover the disk of the sun. But you do get it sometimes on that ingress-egress graze line right along the edge. And they did actually, when you look at it in slow motion, they did actually get some Bailey's beads in this eclipse.
I got the video up. If you want me to press play, I can try and see if it faster. We won't be able to get the sound.
Yeah, that's okay.
What does an eclipse sound like? Like one hand.
Well, this has a soundtrack.
They put a soundtrack.
Oh,
on
I'm sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they were right in the right position, right along the graze line, where they could see it just as it was coming up. That the eclipse was rising at the same time. So they had to do a lot of careful planning to be in the right location for this. And there was a fair amount of atmospheric distortion.
Whoa, that's too loud on my end.
I can barely hear it coming through yours.
Yeah, well, I'm wearing my headphones, so it shouldn't be coming through to you.
Yeah, and the sun looked it was distorted so much from the atmosphere. It had a very much of an egg shape. Yeah, watch this when it comes up. They actually at the bottom of the limb up there on the eclipse when it came up over. And then it went right back out of the annular phase. They had the annular phase only for a few minutes right there where they were. But it was like, that's pretty remarkable that they actually caught that. I'd never seen one I've seen one annular eclipse in '94 on Lake Erie. I've never seen a total solar yet.
I haven't seen either, no.
I think by 2017 we'll
2017, yes, 2017. That'll be the big one for U.S. viewers.
Yeah.
That's cool. So check out that video. I think I put a link to your story about it, so it must be.
Yeah, it's on Universe Today and it's on Vimeo. So yeah, that's a pretty remarkable sequence.
Of course, talking about Star Trek, we get a bunch of comments all of a sudden like, no spoilers, I promise. And Star Trek 2 was the best Star Trek ever, says Michael Jobin. I assume by Star Trek 2 you mean Wrath of Khan. That movie is
Con!
Dan Bice asked if we talked about the hangout with Star Trek and the ISS. We did not, because unfortunately I was on a plane and I missed it.
I didn't get to join in on that, no.
Yeah,
I know they
definitely
did
want
one.
to see that. They did one with some of the actors from the movie, along with the ISS astronauts, which is cool, and I will have to go watch it. It was a Google Plus event, so that is, of course, recorded on YouTube, like all events. So I will, I didn't get to see it, but I will definitely have to check that out. So, oh, and also, Guido Bibra gave us an update about Commander Hadfield's followers. He has 970,000 followers on Twitter.
Oh, he's so close.
He is 30,000
so
away.
go follow Commander Hatfield.
But the Space Oddity video has 13 million views.
Wow.
So people, that is getting out there. So
And only 2 of them were me, so
That's
somebody
what
else
you
is
do.
watching it.
I don't think I don't think there's a day that's gone by since Sunday I haven't watched it once. So.
yeah. So he's done an amazing job getting that, getting people excited about space flight, and that is irreplaceable. So thank you, Commander Hadfield. You're awesome. Keep doing what you do. Yay. So I think that is it. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you to Matthew and David for joining. Thank you to Shenandoah Joe for caffeinating me. We live in Charlottesville. Please, come to this coffee shop. There you go. Usually we're not supposed to show logos, but I think we'll be okay with that one.
Yeah, then get it.
It's not a corporate whatever. They're not going to sue me. So yeah, that is your Weekly Space Hangout for the week. Sorry we're a little disjointed this week. And we have the virtual star party on Sunday night. I think they are still collecting your astrophotography. They're doing a little contest, Fraser and Scott. So go ahead and send in your astro photos to the virtual star party. Join them on Sunday night. Monday is usually the astronomy cast recording, but I don't know if Fraser will be back from people I owe by then. So check the astronomy cast page.
They're sliding the virtual star party back to 9 o'clock p.m.
Yes,
I noticed too.
right.
So that's going to be in the a.m. for us people on the East Coast. So.
Yeah, it's because most of the guys,
it's
if you have a
dark out.
telescope around the world and want to join and do other time zones, we are happy to do that. But right now, it's mostly West Coast guys. So,
yeah.
Sorry, David. I know.
That's okay. If it's clear, I'll stay up.
One of our East Coast holdouts.
I'll look like this. I'll have my headlight on out there.
Yes, that's right. It's funny because now I'm like, oh yeah, I see you on Sunday, and there's no sunlight.
Yeah, you only see me like this in the dark, so with the red light on. So.
Yeah, so that's 9 Pacific, midnight Eastern,
Midnight
on
Eastern,
Sunday. Possibly Astronomy Cast on Monday at noon. And then Learning Space will be rolling around. I think we're going to be talking about astrotourism, how to go see a solar eclipse or lunar eclipse all around the world with Rick Feinberg of the American Astronomical Society.
Oh, cool.
He's a cool guy, so that is Wednesday at 4 Pacific. Yes, I will be back home by then, so I will not have to be in a coffee shop. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for participating. And yeah, that's it for your Weekly Space Hangout. Bye, everyone. Have a good weekend.
Take it easy. A lot of people were imaging the moon. Take a look at your photos. You might have caught this impact. It's quite possible.
Is that what Matthew? What is Matthew showing? I think I missed.
Yeah, that's
the sequence.
Yeah, that's the sequence of photos from NASA.
Yeah.
Released. I'm sorry for the low resolution. That's all I could find, but you can see that the explosion washes everything out while it's going. So it was a pretty major impact.
When you watch the video too, it was only seconds long. It was pretty quick. But it was interesting that we don't get a lot of impacts. They watch the moon, incidentally, when there's a large shower like the Leonids or the Perseids or the Geminids. They have seen impacts of those micrometeorites on the dark side of the moon. If the moon is at a favorable phase, naturally during full moon, you're not going to see a 4th magnitude impact. It wouldn't appear. But when the moon is at a crescent phase like that, especially when it's a waxing crescent because it's in the evening time, so a lot of people would have been watching it. I'd really be interested to see if there have been amateurs that have caught flashes on the moon before, either visually or photographically. So it'd be interesting to see.
So can you maybe repeat that date and time again for any astrophotographers watching? I'm going again. I'm in costume. David, why don't you take it away?
Okay.
And Matthew, go ahead. Maybe start with the moon crater one. I'm interested to hear about this one.
I can start on that. Yeah, that came around last night, and it was very interesting. It came around on Twitter. NASA released one of their science videos. They were talking about that they had seen. They have a survey that goes on out of the Marshall Space Flight Center, out of the Meteoroid Impact Environment Office, that they're watching and continuously videoing the moon whenever they can for impacts. And it turned out on March 17th, they saw a fairly large-sized boulder-type impact on the moon that was about 4th magnitude, which means that if you were looking at the moon at that time, you would have seen it. The moon at that time, the first thing I saw that, I started scrambling to see what the phase and the viewing visibility of the moon. The moon was about the same phase it is right now. The moon reaches first quarter tomorrow. At that time on March 17th, it was a few days prior to first quarter. It was a waxing crescent. And this impact was in the mare of Imbrium on the moon. So it was on the nighttime side, but the earthward-facing side. You know, people always mistake the far side and the night side of the moon. Sometimes the night side of the moon is that. All right.
All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Weekly Space Hangout. I am Nicole Gugliucci, and I am currently in a very noisy coffee shop in Charlottesville, Virginia. I'm here for my graduation this weekend. Since I'm on travel, I will be doing the production from the background, but I have with me two lovely co-hosts. I have David Dickinson.
Hey.
Hello. And Matthew Francis. And so they have a host of stories that we are going to be talking about. Continue to send your comments in all the usual places, on YouTube, on Google+, use the hashtag Space Hangout, and I will get those questions in and keep sharing the links out, but you won't be hearing much from me this week. But we have some stories about major moon impacts, about the Kepler space mission, of course, is currently having a little bit of trouble, and solar activity, and I may give a quick spoiler-free review of Star Trek, the movie, the second reboot movie.
We're the only science writers that currently aren't watching Star Trek right now, I think.
Exactly. It's because I already saw it. I'm going to get into that. But David, why don't you...
Actually facing toward Earth during a new moon, during an eclipse and things like that. So, and it was kind of funny last night when I saw the video, when I saw the tweet come around, I misunderstood a friend of mine. I thought he said May 17th instead of March. So I thought he's over in UK. I thought he means there's an impact going on right now. So I scrambled and got my binoculars and ran out and took a quick look at the moon just to see if there was something going on amiss, like we had a really large impact going on. Then I came back and read his email again. It's like, oh, okay, it said March. So then we started combing through Flickr pages last night, looking at people's photos. And incidentally, I emailed Bill Cook at Marshall Space Flight Center and asked him about the exact time because it wasn't really clear when this occurred. He said it was at 3:55 UTC on March 17th. So that would have been early in the morning, late at night. It would have been about not quite 11 o'clock at night for the East Coast. And I looked at the visibility. The visibility would have been over the Pacific Rim region in the west coast of the United States. So if anyone was imaging the moon that night, and a lot of people were because it was very near Jupiter at the time. So it was on March 17th, 2013 at 3:55 UTC. That's right down to the second. So, and you know, I incidentally took a look at first on March 17th, there was a virtual star party that night. However, so I got to thinking, I was like, I wonder if we had happened to be imaging the moon at the same time. So I watched back through the entire virtual star party from March 17th just to see, until I found out, okay, UTC, it was actually the morning of Sunday the 17th. It wasn't the evening. But when we first saw the message go out, it wasn't clear if that was March 17th the evening or March 17th the morning. So I checked. I was like, that would have been very cool if we had caught the flash in the virtual star party, but it didn't occur. I'm always thinking of weird stuff like that.
That would be a VSP first. That would be a VSP first. Maybe speaking of activity, you have some stuff on some solar activity that's going on.
Yeah, the sun is finally starting to show. It's starting to look like it's actually going toward its maximum, like it's supposed to look like, because we're entering into the peak of solar cycle 24, which is peaking the end of this year into the beginning of 2014. But the sun